I think another poetic tradition I identified would be like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but the poetics of indeterminacy.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So the most notable figure, I guess, would be John Ashbery, right?
Of course.
So I think your poetry for me can be said to be indeterminate, as in like meaning is kind of suspended and open to interpretation, right? So no one can say like this is the correct interpretation. And going back to what you said earlier about you not knowing exactly what you mean, right? I think that's the open-endedness, I think, is part of it. But I feel like with an alien artifact, there's also an alien logic, and and there's an alien logic is still a logic, right? And I think when I was reading your works, for example, certain lines like there's nothing to it, alliterative tactics, and malapropisms, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, I think for me there is a method to the madness. So my question is, how do you deliberately write and edit in order to evoke that kind of indeterminacy?
Okay. I guess the word indeterminacy to me also means capturing accurately the intimacy. So actually it's not indeterminate as in vagueness. So do not confuse or conflate indeterminacy with not knowing or drifting. It's actually a state of humility to not confine yourself to a inertia or a form or a definition in perpetuity. So that's what I would define it. Oops, sorry, that definition again. You mentioned certain phrases that I use like in things we trust, Some of I can tell you for sure because I don't want to, lead you on too long. Oops. These are allusions to certain phrases. I'm sure you know. Yeah, some of them could be like slogans. So you could pick up, I heard this before, these are slogans from a particular movement or maybe even an advertising campaign. So the idea of overhearing certain things, that you walk along the streets and you hear certain things, or like advertisements and stuff, it's very much Ashberyan tactic as well. Like a lot of coupled phrases, quotations. So he was probably the first one to accurately reflect how humans actually talk. Just like who's that filmmaker who made films about I know, Robert Altman. If you know Robert Altman films, just check out any of his films. You would see that characters they talk over each other. You don't have the very like, again I'm stereotyping, like you would have speaker A say finish, then speaker B will reply. It's the idea of how you all actually talk is unrealistic. The realistic is when you hang out with your friends. I mean, unlike this podcast where we are trying to be very formal and clear with what we're trying to say. The truth is that we will inevitably speak over each other, and that's why I thought the idea of intimacy is that you will never have everything in complete sentences. You would have a lot of interruption, interjection, and layers of people talking over each other or correction. So much so that sometimes you don't hear very clearly somebody else in the background, but you want to hear. You are, and I think that's what Ashbery. Another poet of mine, John Yeow, that I like, people like that who are writing about those echoes in the background that you will actually want to hear more, because somehow you find, they're actually more interesting than the people who are now just pontificating to me face to face now. And that's also what I like in films, right? Like for instance, some of the films that I enjoy, maybe the main characters are supposedly the heroes, but actually those characters are not that most. You like the side character, you like the gay best friend of Julia Roberts in the kind of rom-com. So that's where this film come alive. So the idea of what you're told to like, what you're told to project your attention to, is a little too dogmatic, and I like to explore those maybe throwaway sentences, characters that are sidelined, characters that you're told that you're supposed to hate or not take seriously, and you not put them in the middle, but you try to incorporate them into a world in which they have a point of view, they can they are not treated as if they are sidelined. I guess that's how I felt about my position then, 10 over years ago. Always look for the underdog. That's what I would say.
I have a question. The other way if you want to jump in. Actually, so in some ways you're talking about the underdog and in some ways not the unimportance of prizes and these forms of like outward recognition. But also in some ways you have become part of the establishment.
Yes, I know, I'm very aware of it.
So because you became director
Yeah.
of the SWF and then you won the prize and so on and so forth. So how in some ways tell us a little bit about that and also tell us a bit about your role as SWF director and what that was like. So that's the
I mean, I
the
never
first question.
planned to become one. I was on the committee. At the time, they have a steering committee that comprised folks from the scene. Like I represented the Straits Times because I was working in the Straits Times. But of course, as I was also a poet, right? So I was on the steering committee for many years. And then in 1990, they asked whether I was interested. At that time, I wasn't interested. But I sort of realized that I could introduce certain literatures or poetries of authors who seldom appear on the scene. So it kind of intruder sort of way, trying to introduce all those things that I feel have not been represented in Singapore. Meaning that you will not be the usual cannot be dead, living white poets. But it also includes writers who write in different traditions and stuff, and also introducing other interdisciplinary programming, which music, films, dance. There were things that I thought would be easier to promote literature because these are art forms that I always view as more glamorous than literature. Like you don't have to read a play before you watch a play. You can watch a play knowing zero about anything about it, and then come out and say, I can talk about the play. But there's no way you can talk about a book without reading the book, right? And it's a lot more torturous, a lot more lonely, a lot more like you cannot wink it. You cannot bluff your way through a book of poetry without reading the book and talking to the poet and say, I haven't read a book, but what is the book about? You can't. So SWF became a platform for me to try to make literature or make writing more, strangely, I would use that word, accessible here. More interesting, more intriguing, rather than the usual. We still have those panels and stuff and lectures, but also to actualize the writing in ways in which you can enjoy, for instance, commissioning plays, commissioning theater, a dance thing, or a translation. So all those things that maybe now you see very, very common, at that time wasn't. Yeah. So the language groups were very siloed. Like, honestly, do you attend a Malay program? Would you on your own? You would want to do that by having them on the same panel with other language, but in a way in which, I can. Otherwise, you only absorb programs that are from your linguistic comfort zone. I was a journalist at the time, so I quit and I joined NEC to become the festival director, and I treated that as a way to introduce programming and writers that hopefully Singaporeans are like, I never thought. I think, for instance, Daryl here would be. I know you were very interested in John Yeow when he came, right? Yeah.
I have a second question, but now it's actually a cheeky one, which is goes back to the poetry. So you talked about death obsession your last two books, and of course, if you know your Freud, death is often combined with eros, so thanatos and eros. And actually, if you read your poetry, there is an undercurrent of sex. There's a sexuality. There is a innuendo. That you talk about sadomasochism. So I'm going to ask you a question. What role does sexuality play in your poetry?
Well, there's a lot of sexual innuendos, and sexuality is a platform where a lot of things that cannot be said can be channeled or enacted through sexual role playing and stuff. I think Memento Mori, the first poem in that series, it has been kind of analyzed by Ko Ji Leong in an essay. I think it's available on QRS, and I think he picked up a lot of the allusions to films that or characters that use sex or things like that. And I think sex is the final frontier for our straight-laced society lah. I guess at this point I would like to mention someone like Marilyn Tan, who uses sex very, very, very in a very open and explicit way, but also in a very creative and interesting, using witchcraft and all those stuff. And it also crosses boundaries between high culture and low culture, and I like that. Yeah, and films have a lot of sex and how they project sex. It's a platform for some topics which we would not want to talk about in Singapore, but you can use sexuality to discuss gender roles, politics, all those things which straight-laced societies will want to pigeonhole into binary oppositions. And it's where you can let down your guard, literally strip naked and be yourself, your authentic selves, whatever, and also in the privacy of where you are with a partner. And those are the things which I think I like to explore in writing.
I think one question for me, I think more to do with poetic craft, would be the question of form, right? I mean, you're a writer who is very sensitive to form. For example, you justify use of twin cinema when it comes to discussing themes of duality, multiplicity, for example. And I think one form that, personally puzzles me is prose poem. So could you share about how you view that form?
A prose poem looks like prose, but behaves like poetry. That would be my facetious way of explaining it. What that means that it really does look like prose passages, right? Paragraph after paragraph. It doesn't have the stanzaic thing. But when you read it, it doesn't have the logic of prose, meaning, traditional short stories. It has the spirit of poetry. It means that when you read prose poem, it may not follow a narrative thread. It may not. It may not. So it does play against types. So a prose poem is the offspring of the best of both of these two genres. I want to say that I've seen a lot of prose poems written, supposedly call themselves prose poems, but they're not prose poems. They're just prose passages because they are just about a topic and they explain very clearly. It's point A to point B. It's very systematic, but it's not a prose poem. A prose poem should actually reconfigure the direction of how logic is. And therefore, when you never know where you're going to end up. If it's very logically explained, then it's not a prose poem. That's my very autocratic way of explaining it. Yeah.
I think another question I had with regard to form, right? I mean, actually I haven't read Pretend I'm Not Here, so I've only read Secret Mentor and One to the Dark Tower Comes, but in One to the Dark Tower Comes, there's like a structure, as you said, a framework. First the calendar instead of contents, and then throughout the collection, it's interspersed with the quarterly reports as well as a slit from sternum to pitzel. So could you talk more about why you chose to work with like this kind of structure?
I think time is the underlying element that links all of this. Yes. I find that time. Yes, Kat. Yes. Time is what we are. Time they won't define. Time is a capsule of who you are at a particular point, rather than thinking that you will remain unchanged. So Pretend I'm Not Here was rather out of time. While One to the Dark Tower Comes, it's almost like a durational art where you feel the change in histories and decades and centuries. So quarterly reports is a kind of cheeky way of trying to adopt the corporate speak, right? Quarterly reports. What have you done in the last 3 months? That kind of thing. Then you realize, oh, it doesn't have the form of quarterly reports. In each quarterly report, you have a particular set of rules, or like one is a kind of like flotation system. So all those are supposedly 21st century living terms and institutions or buildings or machinery that we are used to. And then within that, I try to break down how you can view, like just cycling or something. So you use very, very late modern conveniences, and then you try to demystify it in a way. As opposed to, A Slate from Stern and Pitzel, it's a kind of double play, but it's also about how you butcher, right? So it's a kind of husbandry, a kind of vertical heights and stuff. It's a combination of my response to the 9/11. Yeah, so the first poem is about 9/11, about the invisible jumper, and then it moves to like the Egyptians and how Singaporeans and human beings, Singaporeans especially, like to build tall, obelisks, and basically we always aim for higher and higher and higher. So it has both the lateral and the vertical.
I think when I was comparing like Secret Manta and One to Dark Tower Comes, I think this is just like a kind of Easter egg, I guess. Like, I noticed that you used the words Mirror Lake and also like the symbol of the tower, I think, in Secret Manta as well. Yeah. So, what do these symbols, I guess, represent or evoke for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just obsessed with objects of mystery, right? I mean, mirror lakes and towers in general have been there forever, right? Throughout human history or even prehistory, right? Lakes, when you travel around the world, humans are generally drawn to bodies of water, either the sea or lakes, right? And that's also become the center of human activities. Lakes are where human civilization begin, a lot of them, right? Towers are what I just said about that we tend to build. These are also monuments of to heroes and to loved ones, but also kind of to show the pinnacle of our human ability to conquer and to scale and maybe reach heavens. And when I travel, I'm sure you do too, you would be drawn. I'm sure most everyone would try to go to, like, you go to New York City, you will go to you might have gone to the Twin Towers, so things like that, and you go Chicago, so all those things I would always use the tower as a marker, right, of where you are, literally geographically, like I'm lost, but I know so I have a sense of where you are, and I use that as a metaphor to say, as a directional marker, as a milestone to represent human achievement. So all those, so One of the Tower becomes almost as if I'm trying to understand human beings and how they, how far we have come or how much we haven't come, in the sense that what is the continuity that link an Egyptian building the pyramid to the modern tower, right? It sounds completely like ambitious and pretentious, but when I started writing, I started with the quarterly reports. If it helps you to understand the germination of this collection, it was the quarterly reports that I had in mind. Then everything else falls into place when it was also about the death, of my father, and so death, living, history, all this come to play. I never explained this in this detail. I hope it doesn't really make the reading less interesting. It just hopefully lends a different complexion. Yeah, but what I'm telling you is just one way of reading it. Yeah, yeah.
One last question would be about, other art forms or media, for example, because I mean that is something that really, I guess, marks you out from other writers. So what do you think poetry can do that other art forms cannot do?
The difficulty or the limitation of poetry is precisely its strength, that it requires you to read the word, whatever punctuation, the semantics and everything. You literally have to wrestle with whatever you see, on paper or on the computer, and that's where it should be, because it does not reveal its secrets at first glance. Like again, I'm being a bit facetious, like a movie, where it's visuals, right, or a song. You have it's so selfish and so private of art form that you have no choice but to spend time with it, or be repulsed by it and say, I'm not going to spend more time with this writing because it's so crap, or it's so obtuse, or it's whatever. So if you're really intrigued, I guess good writing would be, to answer your previous question, is that would be good writing that you don't understand at first reading. I know people would say the other way around, but I think when you don't understand it, it could be that you have not caught up with it, that you needed to grow. Like for instance, the first time I read T.S. Eliot, whatever, Four Quartets, Proof Rock, whatever, it's like, I don't think I understood. Yeah, whatever. But the point is that as you grow older, you appreciated it. So you use other words, right? Don't you agree? And then you realize, wow, the secrets reveal themselves when somehow you have your mind and your synapses and everything. So, yeah. That's why poetry is the art form that is demanding. It's completely toxic. It's very generous. It will reveal its, secrets or sexuality, if you want, only if you are equally open and willing to let yourself be immersed in it. If you come with a certain expectations that I'm studying this for my O level or A level and I do want to score A, I'm not saying you can't, but you're not doing yourself a favor by appreciating the poetry for its sake. The idea of art for art's sake, the idea that why do you have to explain do you have to explain the meaningfulness or the usefulness of art or poetry or anything? Then you're missing the point. Yeah. If you only do things that are functional, then you might as well just be an animal, right? You do things because they are pleasurable, they are fun, they are pointless actually. Because if you do things that are full of, there is the point to it, you would not have pleasure, you'll hate it, you'll be a cog in the machine.